In the medieval world, keeping warm was a real challenge. Without central heating or insulation, ordinary villagers had to rely on simple methods to survive freezing conditions. Let us take a look at how they heated their homes without the comforts we enjoy today. The main source of heat in every medieval house was the hearth. It served not only as a cooking spot, but also provided warmth during cold seasons and light after sunset. Without it, getting through winter would have been nearly impossible. However, even though the hearth was vital, it came with many problems. By modern standards, most medieval hearths were extremely primitive. They were often nothing more than a fire placed directly on a dirt floor with a circle of stones or rough bricks around it. And unlike the fireplaces we know today, they did not have a chimney. For many centuries, families lived inside homes filled with smoke and with very little ventilation. Instead of rising neatly through a chimney, smoke spread through the entire room, lingering from chest height all the way to the ceiling. During winter, when doors and windows stayed tightly shut, the smoke grew especially thick. People often sat or crouched close to the ground to stay beneath the worst of the haze. If they had written personal introductions, Enjoy's long walks through smoky houses might have been a common line. The youngest and oldest usually slept closest to the fire to stay warm. But this comfort came with a price. They suffered the most from breathing problems. Historical documents show that many older people and children developed long-term respiratory issues after years of inhaling smoke. One interesting detail is that the fire was almost never allowed to die out. Glowing coals were pushed under ash at night, so they would still be warm in the morning. Starting a new fire from nothing was difficult, and often required borrowing flame from a nearby home. During the coldest part of the year, life centered around the hearth. Families cooked, ate, worked, and even slept close to it. Step too far from the fire, and the cold would take over. Medieval homes had no insulation at all, and walls made of stone or packed earth offered little protection from the weather. Fire danger was a constant fear, especially in houses with thatched roofs. A single spark could ignite the roof, and entire villages could burn. Still, families had no choice but to keep their fires going. It was a decision between freezing and burning. Smoke exposure created serious health issues. Examination of medieval remains shows widespread lung damage and signs of conditions similar to modern chronic lung disease. Soot coated every surface, including the inside of people's lungs. Yet despite the danger, the hearth remained the heart of the household. It gave heat during harsh winters and brought families together. Around its glow, people told stories, taught skills, and strengthened their relationships. As important as the hearth was, it created a major challenge that required simple but clever solutions. Although the hearth supplied vital warmth, medieval villagers faced one serious question: how to deal with all the smoke. Unlike our modern homes with proper chimneys, peasant houses relied on far simpler ventilation methods. The most common answer was the smoke hole, a small opening in the roof directly above the fire. These smoke holes were far from perfect. Usually just a foot or two across, they allowed part of the smoke to rise out, but never all of it. The opening was normally placed at the highest part of the roof, taking advantage of the fact that hot air rises. On calm days with clear skies, this basic system worked reasonably well. Medieval property sellers might have described these homes as offering natural air movement and a genuine rustic atmosphere. The real trouble began when the weather turned bad. Rain or snow that slipped through the smoke hole would land right on the hearth, risking the loss of the valuable fire. To avoid this problem, villagers often covered the opening with a piece of animal skin or a wooden board whenever storms approached. This stopped the moisture from falling inside, yet it also trapped the smoke within the room, turning the home into a stifling and breath-stealing space. As years passed, the inside of a rural dwelling revealed the long history of smoke exposure. Ceilings and the upper portions of the walls became layered with a heavy black coating of soot. This was more than unpleasant to look at. It also served an unexpected purpose. The soot blended with resins released by burning wood to form a natural protective layer that kept roof beams safe from insects and decay. These homes slowly became structures that preserved themselves, although the method of preservation could leave a person gasping for air. The walls did not simply gather soot, they also grew sticky with creosote and residue left behind from daily cooking. This combination of smoke byproducts and cooking grease formed a dark and tacky film that was extremely difficult to remove. In many houses, this buildup accumulated year after year, sometimes reaching a thickness of several millimeters. Living inside such an environment created serious health problems. Eye irritation was constant, causing persistent redness, watering, and even short periods of reduced vision during times when smoke levels were high. Breathing troubles affected everyone, but the youngest and the oldest suffered the most. Headaches were so frequent that people accepted them as an ordinary part of life rather than a sign of illness. A few months ago, I had no idea what a health ring was until my fiancée gave me one, and I was amazed that so few people seemed to know about it. It measures my stress levels, and I discovered that certain supplements caused my stress score to rise while others helped calm it. I adjusted a few habits because of this, and I honestly feel 10 years younger. My wife uses it mainly to track her menstrual cycle, and she is very focused on her sleep quality score. I saw that they currently offer a limited 69% discount, although I do not know how long it will last. Right now, it costs only $60, and it is transparent. This one offers the best value, since other health rings cost around $350, yet provide fewer features. They were able to keep the price low because they removed middlemen like Amazon and Walmart, who usually raise the price by taking a large cut, which results in customers paying several times more. If you are watching on a television, you can look at it by pausing the video and scanning the QR code with your phone camera, or by clicking the first link in the description. Archaeological findings from medieval graves reveal how damaging this living situation truly was. Skull remains often display sinus infections that became so severe they altered the bone. Lung illnesses were common, and many skeletons show signs of long-lasting respiratory infections and inflammation. The most discouraging part for villagers was their lack of both knowledge and means to build better ventilation. The principles of airflow and proper chimney design did not become widely understood until many centuries later. Even if people had understood the issue, most lacked the materials to create improved solutions. Instead, villagers relied on practical adjustments. Many learned to cook quickly when the weather allowed smoke to escape more easily. Some kept their fires smaller during poor weather, giving up warmth in exchange for air they could actually breathe. Others developed the habit of briefly opening doors or windows while cooking to create a cross draft that could push out some of the thick smoke. Winter brought a difficult decision. Leave the smoke hole open and lose precious warmth, or close it and breathe in suffocating fumes. Most decided to close it, believing that cold posed a greater danger than smoke. Because of this, the winter season brought a noticeable rise in breathing illnesses throughout medieval settlements. Since smoke holes offered only limited help, peasants relied on other sources of warmth to make it through the freezing months. When temperatures dropped during medieval winters, peasants turned to a surprising yet effective method of staying warm: their livestock. Bringing animals inside the home was not simply a gesture of sympathy. It was a careful survival tactic that made perfect sense in a world without modern heating systems. The habit was widespread across Europe. As night approached and the freezing air settled in, peasants led smaller animals, pigs, goats, sheep, and chickens directly into the main living space. These creatures were not treated like pets. They were warm bodies that produced enough heat to help a family survive the night. The logic behind this custom was reliable, even if medieval villagers did not fully understand the science. One adult pig can generate close to 1,000 BTUs of body heat each hour, which is roughly similar to a small room heater. A household with 2 pigs, several chickens, and possibly a goat could raise the temperature of a small home by a few important degrees. Medieval interior decorating took on a special meaning. This pig really completes the room. Larger animals, such as cows and horses, were too large for the main room, yet they still offered useful warmth. Many dwellings were built with attached stalls or byres where these animals could stay. The shared wall between human space and animal area allowed warmth to pass into the living quarters. Some smart layouts even placed the animal space slightly below the room where the family slept, allowing the warm air from the animals to rise naturally into the living area. Several hundred rural homes in many parts of Europe still included space for animals inside or directly beside family quarters. The custom only began to disappear with industrial growth and the arrival of better heating methods. This source of warmth came with obvious problems. Keeping animals inside meant constant noise and unavoidable odors. Livestock brought fleas, ticks, and other pests that easily spread to people. When neighbors asked how your evening went, "I slept next to the goat" was a perfectly normal answer. Even with these issues, the advantages outweighed the discomfort when survival depended on it. Archaeological studies show that many homes had marked areas for animals, often with small sunken spots in the floor to hold bedding and waste. Some even included channels that drained liquids to help manage the mess. The method differed depending on region and climate. In Mediterranean locations with gentler winters, animals might enter the home only during the harshest weather. In Scandinavia and other northern places, shared living with animals was more detailed and permanent, with specific building features created to increase warmth transfer. For children raised in such households, this setup was simply part of ordinary life. Historical records rarely describe the practice as strange. It was simply the normal way of living. The dependence on animal warmth revealed something meaningful about survival in medieval times. Peasants relied on practical methods that made use of the materials already available to them. When the heat from animals was not enough, medieval families turned to their next method of fighting the cold. People of that era approached winter comfort in a very different manner from modern society. While people today concentrate on warming entire rooms and buildings, medieval villagers focused on a far more efficient tactic, keeping their bodies warm through careful layering of clothing. This where it do not heat it approach grew from necessity in a period when fuel supplies were scarce and houses were drafty at their best. The foundation of medieval cold weather clothing was wool, nature's original advanced fabric. Wool offers qualities that even modern synthetic fibers sometimes struggle to equal. It keeps warmth even when damp, pulls moisture away from the skin, and contains natural lanolin that gives it some water resistance. For common folk who could not afford finer textiles, rough wool served as their main protection against freezing conditions. Linen formed the first layer for most peasants and was worn directly against the skin. Although linen does not hold heat as well as wool, it absorbs sweat and helps keep the skin drier, an important factor in preventing the deep chill that occurs when perspiration cools on the body. Over this layer, additional wool clothing was added as temperatures sank. A typical winter set of clothes included wool leggings or hose for men, long wool dresses for women, and thick tunics for both. These garments were not changed every day the way modern clothing is. The same pieces might be worn for weeks, or possibly the entire winter season without a single wash. Their version of laundry day was truly a spring cleanup when the weather finally improved. Covering the head was seen as essential. Medieval people understood something still repeated by modern parents. A large amount of body heat escapes from an uncovered head. Simple wool caps or coifs protected the head and often wrapped around the neck as well, acting as both head covering and scarf. For those with greater means, caps lined with fur offered better insulation. The feet presented a special difficulty. Leather shoes of the time provided very little warmth, so peasants developed clever methods. Many wrapped their feet in wool cloth before stepping into their shoes. Others filled their footwear with straw, which created an effective insulating air pocket. Medieval Uggs were nothing more than everyday shoes stuffed with anything that was not currently being eaten by the animals. Unlike today, where indoor clothes and outdoor clothes differ quite a bit, medieval villagers usually wore the same garments no matter where they were. The idea of clothing meant just for inside the home was mostly unknown. After returning from the fields, a person might dry their outer layer near the fire, but they did not change into a different outfit. What is most surprising for modern readers is that medieval peasants usually slept in the same clothes they wore during daylight hours. Special sleeping clothing was a luxury that most could not afford. Instead, they kept their usual garments on and added extra blankets or cloaks over themselves. This avoided the dangerous moment of removing clothes in a freezing room and kept them prepared for sudden problems during the night. The limited supply of firewood made this clothing-based method of warmth a requirement. In many locations, forests belonged to local lords, and peasants had restricted rights to gather wood. Each home was given a specific amount, and collecting more than allowed could lead to severe punishment. Under these conditions, it made far more sense to concentrate on insulating the body rather than trying to warm a large volume of air. Archaeological discoveries provide insight into how well these clothing methods worked. Preserved fabrics from the era reveal tightly woven patterns created to hold air for insulation. Studies of grave goods and the rare garments that survived show repeated repairs and stitching, proving that clothing was cared for and worn for as long as possible. Even with careful layering, staying warm through clothing alone had clear limits, especially during the night when the fire in the hearth was allowed to burn low. This challenge encouraged medieval households to develop yet another way to stay warm. Once darkness settled in during medieval nights, the struggle against the cold became even more difficult. The hearth embers would fade, the air in the home would grow colder, and the deep dark of night would settle over everything. During these hours, medieval families relied on one of the most effective and personal ways to keep warm, gathering close together to share body heat. The sleeping arrangements in a rural home would surprise modern people who are used to private rooms. Entire families, including parents, children, grandparents, and sometimes visiting relatives, slept together on a single large bed platform or shared straw-filled mattresses beside the hearth. The idea of personal space simply did not exist when warmth was a matter of survival. This practice was based on simple principles of heat transfer. A human body produces about 250 to 300 British thermal units of heat every hour. By sleeping closely together, families created a pocket of warmth that could raise the temperature in their immediate area by several important degrees. Medieval marriage advice had a convenient answer for every difficulty. Have you tried curling up together near the pig pen? The usual sleeping area consisted of straw-filled bedding placed on the floor or on basic wooden frames. These were arranged as near to the hearth as was safe, close enough to benefit from the remaining warmth, but far enough to avoid sparks. During especially cold nights, the whole family might sleep directly on the floor next to the fire pit, choosing heat over comfort. Privacy, as we understand it today, was nearly unknown. Parents might conceive children with older siblings resting only a short distance away. Ordinary bodily needs took place within hearing or sometimes sight of other members of the household. This unavoidable closeness was viewed as a normal part of life, with customs and expectations forming around it. The youngest and oldest members of the family were usually placed in the center of the sleeping group to receive warmth from all sides. Children slept between their parents, while elderly relatives might be settled between younger adults who could handle the colder edges. If you were the relative no one liked, you might find yourself on the freezing outside corner every night. To improve the warming effect of shared heat, families created simple but clever tricks. Heated stones or clay pieces were wrapped in cloth and tucked beneath the bedding before sleep. These early bed warmers released steady warmth for hours, easing the initial chill until body heat could accumulate. Some homes used warm water containers made from animal bladders or pottery jugs wrapped in cloth. The bedding itself was arranged to capture as much warmth as possible. Wool blankets, when available, offered excellent insulation. Poorer families used layers of worn-out clothing, sacks, or dried grasses placed on top to serve the same purpose. In regions where animals provided wool or fur, these natural insulators were sewn into covers or placed directly over the sleeping area. Archaeological findings support these written descriptions. Medieval households generally had one shared sleeping space rather than several separate rooms. Even in the larger dwellings of rural families, individual sleeping chambers were uncommon. The idea of a private bedroom appeared first among wealthy households, but even then, servants or children often slept in the same area as their masters or parents. This shared sleeping practice shaped more than just nighttime warmth. It strengthened family ties and reinforced the social structure within the home. Children witnessed adult behavior directly and learned expected customs through constant close contact. Personal secrets were almost impossible to maintain, and the idea of a private life separate from the family unit barely existed. While gathering together at night supplied essential heat, medieval villagers also needed ways to stay warm during daylight without endlessly feeding the hearth. This need encouraged the invention of clever methods for preserving warmth with limited fuel. Beyond the hearth, the animals, and the layers of clothing, medieval people created an impressive range of practical heating tricks that required little or no wood. These inventive solutions showed the creativity of communities that had to endure harsh winters with few resources. One of the most successful heating inventions was the clay stove, a major improvement over simple open fires. These stoves were built from local clay mixed with straw or horsehair to increase durability, and they could hold warmth for many hours after the fire went out. The structure was simple but effective. A small burning chamber attached to a large mass of clay would soak up heat during the fire and then slowly release it throughout the home. These were the first set-it-and-forget-it devices, although the sales pitch would have been short and spoken entirely in Latin. 1 or 2 firings a day, morning and evening, could keep a room at a livable temperature while using far less wood than a constantly burning hearth. Archaeological studies show that clay stoves became more common in Northern Europe beginning in the 13th century, spreading outward from regions like Russia and Scandinavia, where reliable heating was most necessary. Stone heat stores provided another effective method. Large stones placed near the fire during cooking absorbed a great deal of warmth. Once heated, these stones could be moved into cooler corners of the home, wrapped in cloth, or placed beneath bedding to provide focused warmth. Some households even selected special stones chosen for their ability to retain heat, such as soapstone or certain dense forms of granite. These warmed stones served many purposes beyond simple room heating. They could be placed inside wooden boxes to warm feet, a very early version of the hot water bottle. Other families placed heated stones into small containers that could be carried around the home, creating portable heat sources that required no flame. Medieval peasants were the original hot stone spa clients, although without the cucumber water and comfortable robes. The structure of the homes themselves used passive heating ideas, even if the builders did not understand the underlying science. Interior walls were often covered with mixtures of clay, straw, and dough, materials that created surprisingly effective insulation. This early form of plaster helped block drafts, seal gaps, and retain warmth gathered during the day. Packing wall gaps with straw, hay, moss, or worn fabrics formed extra layers of insulation. These natural materials held small pockets of air, creating still zones that slowed the movement of heat through walls and roofs. Although these techniques were not as efficient as modern insulation, they still produced a clear improvement in warmth. Households refreshed this insulation each season, placing new material before winter arrived. Managing doors and windows became a practiced skill during the cold months. Heavy cloth draped over entryways formed simple air barriers that reduced the rush of cold air whenever someone entered or left the house. Some homes used pairs of doors with a small chamber in between. This allowed one door to be shut before the other was opened, a practical method to cut down on heat loss during daily movement. The interior layout of the home also reflected the need to preserve warmth. Areas used for winter work were placed where they could benefit from the heat of the hearth, while sleeping spaces were arranged to make use of warm air rising upward. Some resourceful families set up raised sleeping areas, understanding that the higher level would naturally collect warmer air. The schedule of daily tasks also aligned with efficient heating. Bread baking often took place in the evening, so the leftover heat from the oven would help warm the house through the cold night. In the same way, indoor chores that required physical effort and therefore produced body warmth might be carried out during the chilliest times of the day. Archaeological findings sometimes reveal surprisingly creative heating ideas that do not have direct modern equivalents. In some Scandinavian sites, signs suggest that smoke was guided through hollow spaces in the walls before leaving the building, creating an early form of radiant heat. Comparable systems have been discovered in parts of Eastern Europe where severe weather demanded the most effective use of limited fuel. These passive heating strategies were not only practical, but demonstrated a refined understanding of heat control developed through many generations of experience. Although medieval villagers did not use scientific terms such as thermal mass or convection currents, they clearly understood these ideas in practice and applied them in ways that made harsh winters more manageable. Their methods reveal how closely they observed their surroundings and highlight the human ability to adjust and invent even under difficult conditions. While their techniques may appear primitive today, many of their solutions displayed a practical wisdom that remains impressive even now.